Good evening. I've been asked by a good many people to make a few comments about Brendan Dassey, which I'd like to do now. First of all, to point out that Brendan wasn't really discussed very much by myself and Robert Herman during my phone calls with him, for the very simple reason that Kathleen Zellner is not only going to prove that Stephen was framed, but also prove who did actually kill Teresa Holbrook. That will immediately release Steve and Brendan. To me, that the cases seem directly connected. I've never considered Brendan as being separate to Steve and Avery. I've always been of the opinion that, and I've said this to Robert on numerous occasions, that the timing of Teresa Holbrook's disappearance, for me, is too convenient to be merely coincidence. Now, I do accept that coincidences happen. If coincidences didn't happen, that really would be a very strange world. But the timing of it, weeks before Dennis Vogel and Tom Kusurek were due to make statements, it's just, as I say, it is too convenient for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. So the one thing that I was very pleased about with Brendan, being as I'm a teacher myself, was when he passed his high school diploma, because that's something that, as I said to Robert, every juvenile should leave school with a qualification. And I actually jokingly said to him that maybe he could set up a system whereby if juveniles are about to leave school and they don't have a qualification, they should be locked up until they do. He didn't quite take the bait on that one. And then, in any case, 11.5 years is a bit excessive for basically for wasting police time, because that's really all that Brendan did in his confession. In fact, the lack of discussion about Brendan is probably the most telling factor, because in fairness to Robert Herman, he never once mentioned any of the confession and said, oh well, Brendan confessed to this, he confessed to that, therefore this and that. That was never ever part of the discussion. Although I did once say that if Stephen felt that his situation was so powerless that he has no chance of ever getting out, I'm sure that he would simply admit and then try and get Brendan released by saying, I did it and Brendan had nothing to do with it. And that really led to the conversation about, well, if Stephen was to admit to it, he would then need to explain the why, where, when and how, and there's no way that he could do that. And Robert's reply was that that would indeed be a very, very interesting statement. Personally, it was only, from my point of view, really just a few months ago that I really got the gist of the problem that Brendan was in. I mentioned in a previous video how I understand how people will say, well, you know, he's admitted to that. If he's admitted to it, that's it. And I do get that for some people, that is the way they think. I'm not saying that's how I think at all. That is not how I think. Yes, I was irritated when I first watched Making a Murderer to see that he was admitting to things that were simply false. not nearly as much as I was annoyed at having read the actual transcripts of the confessions. Not nearly as annoyed as I was with Mark Wiegert and Tom Fassbender, that they were clearly being led here, there and everywhere. Clearly didn't have a clue what they were being told, but as long as they'd got something down that fitted their rough idea as to what happened, they were happy to go with that. There must have been a point and some part in their investigation that they realised that Brendan wasn't anything to do with the case. Yes, it was a few months back that I realised how gullible and naive, and if you ever want to watch some of the most harrowing pictures, the few minutes between the two detectives going out from the interview room, and then a few minutes later Bob comes back into the room, those few minutes where the camera is still on Brendan, that they are some of the most harrowing scenes you can possibly watch, because you realise, well, I certainly did, I realised just by watching that how much he'd immediately regretted what he just said. So from a personal point of view, I've written to Brendan quite a few times. I'm sure a lot of us have. Obviously, I've written to Steve a few times. The one thing I would say is, don't expect to reply back. Don't write to them simply because you want a letter back from them. They have got so much going on that it's not about what they can do for your ego. It's what you can do to help them. I must admit, I did, following some of my letters, get a message back that actually made my day, it made my week, it made my month, it made my year, and that was that a close friend of Brendan, who regularly visits, simply sent a message back to say, "Brendan got your letter. He says thanks," and that was excellent. And I was, as I say, I was absolutely made up that day. That well, I'm still cheered up about them. One or two people have in the discussion pages have wondered what to write, what to say to them. I suppose it's an individual thing. Personally, I've always gone for the who you are, where you're from, what do you do. Try and take them away from their mundane existence and take them to somewhere where they've never been. Tell them about where you're from, what do you do. It might seem insignificant to you, but I'm sure that it would fill their hearts with joy to hear from so many people from so many different walks of life. Talking of which, there is a map on the Facebook support group. I would please ask as many people as possible to pin their location on that, because Stephen and Brendan are going to get out, and they can look back at that and be blown away by the level of support. I'm talking about support. Personally, when it comes to financial support, I've sent money to the Steve Drizzen's Centre for Wrongful Conviction and to Kathleen Zellner's support. I think that they're the ones that actually need the support. Personally, also I'd like to a bit random here. I'd like to say a big thank you to Steve Drizzen, who, of all the people that I've emailed and sent messages to, his reply was so quick and so prompt. I was absolutely gobsmacked. So thank you very much to Steve, and I hope one day I might extend a welcome for you to come and visit Scotland and bring your famous client with you, because nothing would give me greater pleasure than to welcome Brendan here to Galashiels. Anyway, that's all for now. I've no jokes about Robert Herman tonight. I'll maybe try and come up with something next time.